This is the Norris Group's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, the award-winning show dedicated to thought leaders shaping the real estate industry and local experts revealing their insider tips to succeed in an ever-changing real estate market. Hosted by author, investor, and hard money lender, Bruce Norris.
Hey everybody, I'm Aaron Norris. We are super excited tonight. Bruce and I are in the studio interviewing Randy Grigg and Mike Grigg. Randy Grigg has been involved in real estate since 1977, and Randy discovered the benefits of using the real estate auction method of marketing real estate after completing a single-family house rehab project that had 3 failed escrows. So a self-proclaimed control freak, he designed his auction company, Elite Auctions, to cater to the desire of clients to sell properties quickly and as is conditioned with no loan, appraisal, or property contingencies. And his auction company his best client was he as a real estate investor, which is pretty cool. Mike Grigg, his son, is a graduate from the prestigious World Champion College of Auctioneers and is a published author of the book Maximizing Your Charity Events Bottom Line. He began his auction career in 2002 and has participated in several charity, benefit, and fundraising auctions. He's also served as past president of the California State Auctioneers Association and is a current member of the Western States Auction Association and the National Auctioneers Association. So this week, we are continuing with renovating our buying system. So back in 2006, we recorded California Only Investor Series that really focused on California-specific strategies for real estate investors. When is just as important, if not more so, than how, and buying strategies here in California changed drastically. So we turned those 1,200 pages into a digital online subscription, and this summer we are renovating, going one by one through each of the strategies, talking about how these strategies change depending on where we're at in the cycle. And we're just really happy to have Mike and Randy here today. Let's get started. Okay, Randy, how did you get into the real estate investing field?
I started out many years ago. It was 1977, and my wife and I had moved to Bakersfield, and I had been to several seminars, real estate seminars, and they basically explained how to buy and finance and find houses to buy to invest in. So once I got a little bit of knowledge, I went out there and I bought my first house in 1977. And I had the seller finance the deal for me, and I think it was like a $25,000 house, and I think I put like $5,000 down, which is a lot of money back then because we didn't have very much. And then he financed it at like, let's say 8 or 9%. That was sort of typical back then, and that's how I bought. Many of my houses were owner financed and with a low down payment. And so over time, I just bought like maybe 1 to 3 houses a year. But I did that for 25 years. And then after 25 years, when I had enough, I said, enough's enough. I don't need any more. There's no point in buying more. So basically, that's how I got involved.
So when did auctions kick in?
Auctions kicked in 2002, I think, is when we got an interest. The interest actually came from an auction that I attended in our neighborhood. It was strange because here I'm driving through our neighborhood and drive there all the time, and you see for sale realtor signs, but you don't see auction signs. Well, I saw this auction sign in a house, nice house, and I said, "What's going on there?" I said, "There must be someone in distress." Mm-hmm. So I attended the auction. I said, because I was going to bid, I said, "I can buy this cheap, man. No one in Bakersfield has $10,000 to bring to the auction to be a bidder." So when I got there, I couldn't find a parking place. There were cars everywhere. And so I went in there, and I said, in the backyard, they had a big band, and they had food and everything like that. And there's like probably 20 bidders there that had $10,000. And I was one of them. So the auctioneer started the chant, and after about the second chant or third chant, I was out because I had a number because I wanted to buy it at a fairly deep discount. Kept going, and it closed. I mean, it finaled at about maybe 5% over what I felt was comp value. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I was starting to flip houses during that period of time, and I wasn't having much luck. And I said, this is the way to do it. We got to figure out how to become an auction company, or at least do auctions for our stuff that we're flipping. So that's how we started on our own stuff.
I'm just curious, and what does it take these days to become an auctioneer?
Well, it's different state by state. Each state kind of has its own laws or lack of laws.
Just anybody can just jump right in?
California, you don't have to be licensed to be an auctioneer. You do have to have a bond, a surety bond, and that's it. However, to be an auctioneer, I think it's really smart to go to auction school. That, believe it or not, that does exist, where you just learn how to do the chant, learn the business itself, join the trade associations and whatnot. But it just takes a lot of practice. You have to have definitely or overcome or not have a fear of being in front of people, because you're basically a public speaker when you're an auctioneer. So if you can overcome that or not have that going into it, that helps a lot. And the chant can just be learned through practice and training and whatnot.
I was just imagining a test where it was like a speed test, like you had to get through saying something with pronunciation in a certain amount of time.
They do. They actually do at auction school. There are some different tests. I've been out of it so long I could even probably give you an example of that. But different auction schools have different ways they teach. But they'll give you tongue twisters and get you used to kind of saying tongue twisters really, really fast and making it clear, when you're saying it, so people understand what you're saying still. And then you develop the chant. You kind of relearn how to count. You're almost singing when you count in a way. And it's amazing how fast you forget 1, 2, 3 when you're doing all the filler stuff. And you're like, what number did I just say?
Oops.
Yeah.
You said 500,000.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So did you guys launched it at the same time, or did you come in later?
I came in at the same time. My dad brought the idea to me of starting an auction company, and it piqued my interest. I had never really even been to a live auction. You'd see them occasionally on TV or maybe at the fairgrounds when they're selling the animals. It's just California is a different auction culture, maybe a little bit of a lack of an auction culture out here compared to when you go visit the South or the Midwest. It's a very common way of selling a lot of different things.
Really?
And you just don't see it out here in California. It's a little bit different. Don't know why. Couldn't answer that question. I'm sure there's a bunch of theories out there of why that is. But that's about my knowledge of what an auction is from what I've seen on TV. I've never even been to a live auction at that point. And I said, this sounds kind of fun.
Well, your background is in marketing as well, right?
Yeah, I have a marketing degree. And I was interested in real estate just because I grew up with my dad doing it all the time. And he was that, and he worked in the farming industry as well. Those were kind of his two things that he did. And I don't like heat that much. I live in Bakersfield, but I like staying in the air conditioner. So I said, the real estate seems like there's less heat involved than being out in the field. So I said, I'm going to take more interest in that side of the business.
Oh, right.
So, and then he brought this auctioneer idea to me, and I said, I'd like to go to auction school and learn how they do that, and go get my real estate license, and I could be our broker and be that side of the deal. Because when you're doing real estate transactions by auction, you do have to be licensed just like a regular brokerage.
Okay.
Now, to do the chanting and the bid calling at the auction, you do not have to have a real estate license, but to sit down and do the contract, talk about pricing and stuff like that, you do have to be licensed, just like any broker or agent would be.
Well, we learned the hard way I know we'll get to eventually, that marketing plays such an important role in the auction process. So, it's the chanting, it's getting your broker's license, but comparatively, when you're looking at listing with a realtor versus an auction company, marketing plays a huge role before the process happens. So, how much money are we talking about just a typical property that's getting up for auction?
If you were to auction versus maybe list and sell traditionally, I think times have really changed since 2002. I know that doesn't sound like that long ago, but we're talking that's 15 years ago now. It's crazy.
It is.
But times have changed. When we first started, we did a lot of print advertising, display ads, classified ads, and a lot of mailers. We did postcard mailings that would advertise the auctions to targeted areas. Usually with a residential property, we just kind of took a radius and sent out 5,000 or 10,000 postcards to that radius around the property. But sometimes you had more unique properties that you needed to target. Now, with the way the internet has taken off, you can almost get away with not doing any of that print, and not almost. I think you can get away without doing any of that print or mailing marketing that you used to have to do, which is the expensive part of the marketing. The internet's the cheap part or free part.
Just to give you an idea real quickly, when we first started, probably the average marketing cost that we felt was necessary to be successful was about $8,000 per house.
Per house, yeah.
So that's why it's nice to have more than one house, because you can basically $8,000 for how many? Like maybe 3 or 4 houses.
Right.
Our last auction in 2012, $2,500.
Wow.
What the marketing cost was.
How many houses were in that auction?
One.
Okay.
And it was very successful.
It was extremely successful. It was a super nice house in Los Angeles. It was completely remodeled, decent area,
but still a tough market.
Still a tough market.
Yeah, it was a tough market.
Wasn't...
But we had probably 7 or 8 bidders.
Okay,
and 2 that really wanted it, which is what you need.
Yeah. And the price actually, it went for, if you were to comp it that day on the auction, it went for exactly that number. It was amazing how accurate that auction went, and the seller was happy, which as the auction company, that's all we care about.
Yeah.
The price really doesn't mean anything if the seller's not happy.
Right.
If the seller if you get to the end of the auction and you have a reserve of, just hypothetically, let's say $100,000. I know you're probably going to ask that later. And the seller's not happy, there's nothing we can do. I mean, it doesn't matter how great we feel the auction went.
Yeah, and for those who are not familiar with auctions, let's talk real quickly before we get into quadrants. What are the different kinds of auctions?
Sure. I'm sure that was your next question.
Yeah, actually, it was. The perfect timing.
Well, there's 3 basic types, and it's interesting because the first 3 auctions that I did, I used the absolute auction, which is basically selling regardless of price, no reserve, no minimum bid. And I did that because I wanted to see if the auction process worked. Well, it didn't work too good in the first 2 because I think the comp was, say, maybe, let's just say percentage-wise, I was probably 30% below what the comp was. So I lost some money because it's absolutely, you have to sell regardless of the price. So I lost, on those first 2. But I learned on how to do it better. So on the third one,
That's motivating.
I didn't want to give up because I saw enough positive things that I thought we could still make it work. And the third one turned out really, really good. Okay. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That turned out good. We had like 13 or 14 bidders.
It was really good. And a lot of the tweaking had to do with marketing.
That's what I was going to ask. What changed?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it came down to like, wow, this word really drives bidders, and this word doesn't.
What's interesting is it's got to be minute changes. It's not like you did everything wrong.
No.
You did almost everything right, and still it didn't work.
It still didn't work.
Yeah.
And
I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Then the second one was minimum bid. Minimum bid auction is where they have a price. And going in, if you hit that price, you get the property.
So the property starts at $100,000 with a minimum bid auction.
Yeah.
If you get $100,000 or above, it sells.
Right.
You don't have to confirm anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's published.
It's published.
That number is published.
The minimum reserve auction.
And there's one company that does that very well, and I can't.
Was it Kennedy?
Kennedy and Wilson.
Yeah.
They do excellent job on minimum bid auctions. We've been to a couple of them, just observing. And then the other one that we use is the confirmation, seller confirmation, where there's a reserve that's not published or available to the public. And that's the one that we basically used for the people that we sold for, and our own properties, too.
So shill bidding can happen in which one of those three? So show bidding being the seller gives somebody permission in the audience, or they could technically be in themselves of driving up the price without.
Sure. It's illegal to do at the absolute auction level.
Okay.
Not going to say no one's ever done it. We haven't done that, but it's illegal to do that. It is legal at the other two levels. The minimum bid, you don't need to do it because you're starting the auction at that published price.
Okay.
Okay. Now you could do it after that, but that's illegal. Once you've accepted the opening or the minimum bid of $100,000 that we talked about earlier, you have a sale at that or higher. You're not allowed to run the bid right there.
Okay.
Now, with a reserve auction where nobody but the auction company and the seller know the actual price that needs to be reached, which is how pretty much not all, but most car auctions are done.
Okay.
The auctioneer can run the bid up to the reserve, but not above the reserve. So let's say to create kind of that bidding craziness vibe that you get, the auctioneer might say, let's start at $100 on this house, and then of course you don't even need a bid there. Let's say your reserve's $100,000. Nobody knows what the reserve is. The auctioneer could technically just go lightning fast, get it up to $100,000. Then they have to actually start taking real bids legally.
And they'll say, you've been to many. We never did that.
We didn't.
Our reserve auctions, we did not ever have fake bids.
We did not.
We always did it the right way. If we had we never had a real bad auction.
No.
We've had some that didn't reach the reserve, obviously, but it's interesting. So we never had to do that.
When you have, if you think about it logically, when you have a reserve auction, you can't sell that house unless you hit that reserve. So if you run the bid up to that reserve amount, now you can sell the house. So now when the bidding starts taking place, it shouldn't be run up from there. That's illegal to do. Not like I said, I'm not saying no auctioneers have ever done it.
But with seller confirmation, nobody knows except the auctioneer and the seller.
Correct.
So technically, they could do it and nobody would really know the difference.
You're
right?
correct.
Okay.
You're correct, and that's why I'm saying I'm not saying it's never been done, but legally that's how it's supposed to work. Now, when you start running the bids on like an absolute auction with no minimum, no reserve, that's completely illegal. You have to let the buyers tell you where they're willing to go. Now, with a good auctioneer, they can steer them in the right direction, obviously, with the increments and whatnot. But really, you cannot have a plant out there. It is complete. If you got caught doing that, you'd be in big, big trouble. And
the only thing I worry about, and the reason I wanted to bring it up, is the online auctions. Everything is going online. And who's really watching? I mean, it's interesting. Do you think eBay changed the game, made people a little bit more comfortable with the process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
I work for a business that bought a lot of their inventory online, and it was fascinating to watch. He was buying high-end furniture from all over the world, actually, and minimum reserve bids, and it was like a game. At the end of the day, you had to have your best and final in, because when the auction ended, the price went sky high, but nobody was going to purposely start driving up the price until it was absolutely time.
That's
that
true.
Was funny.
Yeah. And that's true. That's how online auctions work. I mean, you only need about 3 minutes to have a successful online auction.
And what's interesting, and I know we'll get to this eventually, a lot of those minimum bids might be entered in automatically, so the technology company is going to know beforehand if things are going to go well. Just anyway. Okay. Well, let's get into the quadrant. If we're talking about a market turn from like 2006 and 2007, when we're coming off of a peak, where were you guys as far as an auction company? What were the conversations you were having? Were you preparing for a crash? What was going on?
Myself, I really relied on Bruce on telling us where we were at, because I never really thought, as an investor, you don't really think about markets. You just think about cash flow. So Bruce
you do. Because you're not really a flipper, right? You were
I'm really
more
not.
I mean,
we've flipped a lot of properties, and here now we're starting to liquidate some of our investor properties. But back in the day, I was an investor and really didn't track the market like Bruce did, and he really got me on track as far as knowing where we're at. And I knew that it was coming to a halt here pretty soon. Bakersfield, we got into 2007. I think the market was still going up just a little bit, because we're always late. Like, we're way behind this one. We're still we're low right now.
Right.
But Anyway, I didn't really think about it, to be honest with you. I don't know if we really changed or really had any discussions about what was going on. How did you remember it?
We didn't really change what we were doing.
Yeah.
But the conversations on the phone started to change with the sellers.
Okay.
That's what I felt. Because
Okay.
I talked to pretty much all the sellers. I was a licensed one, so I kind of had to do all that fun stuff of evaluating the property, talking about the terms. Well, you both know how fun that can be. So, instead of like, an agent or a seller calling and saying, "Hey, I've got this house and the market's hot," and it's like, we know in 30 days it's going to be even hotter. It was more like, man, in 30 days the market could be a lot less hot, and that's when we're holding the auction. We needed about 30 days to market it before we actually held the auction event at the house, and so what might be worth, this today is going to be probably a little bit less and a little bit less demand in 30 days.
Well, in 2005, I remember selling a home through the MLS, and I listed it one day, and I had 70 showings.
Yeah,
so think about putting those 70 people eyeball to eyeball on the lawn.
Yeah.
That's how the auctions worked,
Right,
especially during we're talking about boom cycle.
Yes.
That mood switches, and then when it goes to the other quadrant, when you go to quadrant 2 now, then all of a sudden usually you have the owner lagging reality.
Yes.
Especially during this cycle. I mean, because, you're going, gosh, we were, let's say it's a lender. Well, we owed 360, and ultimately, 3 years later, they get 80. Okay, it's hard to get ahead of that curve if you're not thinking, I'm just willing to take whatever the audience says. Yeah. That's the number.
Yeah.
Because we may not see another decline like that, but even in the 90s when builders had a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
Those were pretty fun to attend as a buyer because, Kennedy Wilson usually had pretty reasonable starting bids. And there were occasions that, that's what you got it for.
Real quick before we start getting in the quadrant 2, was technology changing at that time that was not necessarily disrupting the business model, but making it easier, online auction software, things like that? Definitely.
We saw it change year to year, actually, with technology changing. And when we started, it online bidding wasn't really even a thing. And I mean, pretty quickly into it, we realized like, wow, people are doing hybrids now where people are bidding against the live bidders online, and you have somebody representing the online bidders at the actual live event. But we found our method, and I still think this would hold true today. We were dealing with the retail end user buyer. We were not dealing with the savvy, quote unquote, investor that real estate was a business to them. We were dealing with somebody that was ultimately going to live in that property, and people like that want to be there. They want to be there. They want to be around the house that they might be living in. They want someone to hold their hand. Because they're nervous. It's not every day that you go to an auction, let alone buy the biggest investment of your life at an auction. So we found that there wasn't really much of a need for online bidding the hybrid way, but in the rest of the auction business, it was really transitioning. And today, it's crazy how that's.
Where were realtors at? Were they for you, against you? I remember, realtors stealing signs and flyers.
I think they were against us in general because they wanted it their way, and they how it was competition. We didn't have a problem with it. They never really stole any of our signs that we know of. But they want to keep their thing together, and they don't want competition from someone else. And we didn't really give them much competition because we weren't really volume type auction company. So they knew we were there, and they came to them, and they watched, and they said, "Oh, this is pretty interesting," But we never had enough business that it was going to affect their business ultimately, because we never expanded big time, into one house at a time.
Okay.
And one might be in Riverside, and one might be in Pomona, and one might be in Bakersfield. You know what I mean? So it's spread out all over the place.
Yeah. We were able, with the auction method, we were able to kind of go outside our market of Bakersfield because it worked everywhere, and the same licensing requirements all throughout the state. But I think the realtors viewed us as disruptors. We were kind of represented, like the Dollar Shave Club of the shaving industry, fighting Gillette. They saw that, hey, this could get big.
Okay.
But it isn't, so we're not going to go too crazy yet. But there were definitely, you'd hear whispers about don't attend those auctions.
For more information on hard money loans and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For information on passive investing with trust deeds, visit tngtrustdeeds.com.